Okay, so in this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to combine a scan of a manually drafted drawing and a digital drawing. So I'll start with the digital drawing. I'm going to use this typography map as an underlay or a backdrop to my drawing of that I've drawn and scanned in. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I set the scale of this and set the page of this up correctly, because we're going to use that to determine the size of our drawing when we bring in the scan. So again, I'll do this on a layout. I'll make sure that the size of the layout, which you can get to by going right-click Layout Properties, is what I want it to be. So I want an ArcD 24 by 36, so that I'll leave that alone. And I also want to set the scale of the window to 1/2 inch equals a foot. So I will select the detail window, Properties, Detail, set the inches on page equal to 2 feet model. The equivalent of 1/2 inch equals a foot. I'm also going to update. So again, this stuff is probably easier to do in Rhino than it is in Photoshop. We'll just update this stuff now. 1/2 inch, delete the graphic scale, so redraw it for right now. And I'm also gonna, I don't have a line weight set to this layer here. Okay. So now we have a drawing, a base drawing of our site, typography lines, at the right scale on the right paper size. And I would go ahead and just print this to PDF. So I just hit print. I'm going to Rhino PDF. I'm going to do correct paper size again. That's how we'll set the page size in Photoshop. And you can set that to like 100. And go ahead and click print. Save that in my file here. I'm just going to. Okay. And so once you've created the PDF, then you want to go to Photoshop and open it. Over here in Photoshop, I'm going to open that file. I'll go to File, Open, navigate to where that PDF is, open. Now, in here, we have to set a couple things. One of them is, I think the default option here will be cropped to bounding box. You want to make sure you're set to media box. Otherwise, it'll crop it just to where the lines are, rather than leave the margins on the page like what we have in Rhino. So I'm going to set that to media box. I'm also going to set my units to inches. So you can see there it's 24 by 36. And I can leave that at 300. Now I can also, down here where it says mode, this is just important to keep in mind. I'm going to do a black and white drawing here, but if you wanted to have color or add color or something like that, you would want to change this to either RGB or CMYK. I'll just click grayscale. And so what you're actually doing there is you're setting the color settings for the whole file. So any other drawing or image you bring into the same file will automatically be converted to grayscale. So keep that in mind. I'll set it to grayscale and click OK. Now you'll also notice that once I bring it in, there is no background. There's no white background. So when you export like a vector drawing from Rhino, you're basically just exporting the lines. So what we have here is a transparent background in Photoshop, and I'll quickly make a new layer and fill it with white to fill that in. I'll go to my paint bucket tool there on the left. You can also get to it by hitting G on the keyboard. And then down at my color swatches, it should be by default black and white. I'll just swap them so the white is on top. Of course, you can click it to double check the right color. And then I will just click page. So I filled my whole layer 2 with white. Obviously that layer is in front right now, so it's hiding everything else. So I'll just slide it to the bottom. And so now we have a drawing with a background. And we're ready to begin to superimpose our scan of our manual drafted image. I will go where I've saved this. I'm just using this drawing from Hans Trenton Bathhouse. Oops. All right, so I'm going to just drag it into the file. I'll make sure Photoshop there. I'll just drag it into Photoshop and place it, hit enter. You can also get to the same way, do that same by going file, place, and I would just choose embedded. And like I've explained in the past, this is what's called a smart object. I'll just slide it to the top there so the lines aren't in front of it. And that means that it's like retaining a link to the file that's actually saved on my computer. So the first thing I'll do is I'll rasterize it. I'll make it like embedded. I'll make it part of this file. So I can just right click on the layer, kind of in the middle there, it says rasterize. Now make sure you click on the area where the layer, like on the blank part of the layer over here, rather than clicking on the little thumbnail of the layer. That'll change what options show up for you. So click over there and hit rasterize. Okay, and so now we're ready to, the first thing we want to do is scale this. So there's a couple ways we can do that. You could, if you know like what size your paper is that you've scanned, you should be able to bring it in and just scale it to that size. The way to figure out what size it is in here is I could select that layer and go to the rectangular marquee tool, right click, retransform. And it should give me an indication. It's actually giving me that indication in pixels there, X and Y, how large that is. Now, let's see, we go to window, go to info. So under the info panel, it's giving me those measurements in inches. So I could compare that to what I know my paper size to be and figure out how to scale it from there. If you want to scale something precisely, what you do is, again, you would go to select the layer, rectangular marquee tool, right click on it, go to free transform. And when you're in free transform, up at the top, you'll see that there is the option to scale it. So the width and the height percentage numbers are scale numbers, 200%. Then it's twice as large, right? And I've clicked the little link button is clicked, which means that whatever I enter for the width, the height also changes proportionally. If I unclick it, you'll see it'll stretch or smush it, which I don't want that. I want to keep it proportional. Okay, so there it is. Oops, 200%. Now I don't think that's what I actually want. So I'll just hit escape real quick. The other way you can do it is if you don't know your paper size or if it's cropped weirdly, maybe you took a picture of it with your phone rather than scanning it. You could also measure it. And the way to measure it is to use a tool called the ruler, which is one of these. Oh, it's under the eyedropper tool. So click and hold your mouse on the eyedropper tool, and under there you'll see ruler. And what ruler allows you to do is like measure stuff on your page. So if I know, for example, what this dimension is supposed to be, I could click here. Right, you have to click and drag. So click and drag to what the dimension is supposed to be. And again, in the info panel, it'll give me a number of what I just measured. So that dimension in there is 2.344 inches. Now, again, my drawing is half an inch equals a foot, so that'd be about four and a bit feet, right, on my page. In other words, I can just divide that dimension by half, and it should give me, I'm sorry, multiply it by half. It should give me what my numbers are, right? So there's 2 inches in every, or sorry, 2 feet in every inch on my page, right? So 2 times 2 would be 4. It's about 4 feet. Anyway, so let's say I knew that dimension is meant to be about 8 feet, right? Which means it would be about 4 inches on my page. Now, I have a kind of weird number here, and I want to scale this precisely so I know it's at exactly the right scale. The way to do that, the way to figure out how precisely to scale it, is going to be to do what I was showing there with the percentage. Now, so I know that the dimension is 2.344, and I know that I want it to be 4. So what I can do is simply divide. Again, the way to do this when you're scaling is always to divide the dimension of what you want it to be. I want it to be 4 by the dimension of what it is. It is 2.344. So I'll say 4 divided by 2.344 equals 1.7. Now that's a ratio. So it also, I would move the decimal place twice to convert that to a percentage. So I want it to be 1.7 times larger, or 170%. So I would go back in here, rectangular marquee tool, right click, retransform, and up at the top I'll click the little link button to constrain keep it proportional when I scale it. Type in 170. Add a little bit here. Okay, and when I'm done, I'll press enter. If that happens to you, just click once in the viewport and then press. Okay. So now it's at the scale that I want it to be. And just to confirm that, I'll go in here and measure this again. So it's pretty close to 4 inches there. It's hard to measure things super exactly, but we can always scale it again if we wanted to. So it's pretty close. That's close enough for me. Okay. And now I need to crop this image. So the first thing I'll do is there's a couple ways you can do this. I would probably just select what you want to keep. So again, I'll use the rectangular marquee tool. Instead of just right-clicking, I'm actually going to click and drag my mouse now, select the area that I want. And then I will, let's do, I hit Control F on the keyboard. Did they change that? Okay. So the other way to do it is to, right now, I would right-click and go to select first, second from the top. And oh yeah, it won't look any different, sorry. But you can see there's the little dash line around the outside. So I've selected everything except for what I originally selected. Then I would hit delete on the keyboard. And when I'm done, I can click in the area of the selection, or I can hit Control D on the keyboard. Now I think what'll happen is, yeah, so it won't actually delete the stuff that was off the page when I did that. So we could always move it and delete the rest of the stuff if we wanted to. You can always use the eraser tool right there, which works just like the paintbrush. You can change the size of it. And I would move back to the selection tool, move it out of the way, back to the eraser tool, or E on the keyboard. So I want to have it so it's just that part of the drawing, right? That's how you would kind of generally crop it. So let's say now we have it sized and we have it cropped. What we also want to do is get rid of the background so that we can see what's behind the drawing, the topo lines. So what I would do next is I would go to the magic wand tool. So we've used in the past the quick selection tool, so click and hold there. And instead of that, we're going to use the magic wand tool. And what this tool does is it allows us to select kind of similar colors, really. So if I click in here, and you might find that it's on contiguous by default. When it's on contiguous, it'll only select areas that are contiguous with where you click. So you can see I've selected everything around my drawing, but nothing like within it, right? Nothing within these spaces in here. You want to uncheck contiguous. And then based on where you click, it'll select every pixel on the page that it's within a certain range of that same color. And you can see it's doing a pretty good job of like outlining where our black lines are and where our gray or background areas are. And once I'm satisfied with my selection, I would go, so I can also, if I want to refine it, before I actually crop out the background stuff, I could go to select and mask, and I could use that to fine tune anything. So I'm sorry, I should actually point out what I've actually selected is in fact the background stuff. You could right click and go to select inverse. You could also just invert it once you've created a layer mask. Either way it works. And go to select and mask. Really sure why it's not previewing what it'll look like. It should preview. Oh, okay. Up at the top, there's like a slider. The more we slide that over, the more we don't see what we've cropped out. So it actually looks pretty good. Now, again, if you take like a photo and you have kind of a gradient to your background, you might find that take some like refining. You can play with these sliders and kind of see what it'll look like. But for me, I'm pretty satisfied with that. And I'll click OK. Now, so all we did was we changed our selection. So we still have to crop out the background. And I'll go ahead and click in the layer panel, add layer mask down at the bottom there. And so just like we've done in the past, this creates a layer mask that affects the transparency or the opacity of what's on our layer. And if I hold Alt on the keyboard and click inside the layer mask, we can actually see what's going on there. So anywhere where this layer mask is white, our drawing is visible. Anywhere where it's black, it's invisible. Now we could have deleted the background, but I think this is a better option because it allows us to clean things up. Again, if our background isn't perfect or if we have lines that are closer together that we need to work on a little bit, we could do that using our layer mask. So for example, I want to get rid of that little line that isn't supposed to be there. I would hit brush. Again, I have my layer mask selected and see how I can select either the layer or the mask. That means I'm drawing on the mask. And again, if I draw in black, it's going to make stuff disappear. If I draw in white, it's going to make stuff visible. And that's good enough. So we've cropped out the background, but we can also now see where the typography is all the way through our drawing. Now, maybe that's something you want. Maybe you don't have like a floor that's blocking out the typography. But if you do, you could also crop out the typography in the areas where it would be blocked, right? So for example, let's imagine this is like a concrete slab or something that would make it so we wouldn't be seeing the ground. So I would actually just crop out our typography lines there so that we get a sense that that's not like looking at the ground inside our space. And in order to do that, I'm just going to make a new layer between the topo lines and the hand drawing that I've done there. And I would make a new layer. I use the rectangle tool. I would roughly outline where I want to block out the background. Paint bucket, white, add my selection. And you could do the same thing. You could, because so there you can see our like the lines cropped. So I could do the same thing with the paintbrush tool. Like I could just by drawing in black and white. I'm not erasing it, making some white between the hand drawing and the topo drawing that you don't see the topo lines. Let's imagine all these 4 different areas had floors and all the other, or sorry, the area in the middle didn't. Paint over that one. All right. And again, that does preserve the editability of it. So that's kind of how you do it. So once you've got the 2 drawings combined the way you want, once you've got everything, I guess I should also point out, we can also now like edit this drawing. So you are in color and it's looking like weird, like it has weird colors, you can always make a black and white layer. I think I'm in grayscale, so it won't let me. So yeah, if you ever want to change it, by the way, you go to image mode. There's like those color options that we saw at the beginning when we opened the PDF. So if I were in RGB and I wanted to make it black and white, I could in the layer adjustments and add a black and white one. And then I can also, of course, change things like the exposure, darkness of it, just to my drawings. So the way you apply a adjustment is layer adjustment to a drawing is to hold Alt on the keyboard, place your mouse on the line between the two layers until that little icon shows up, the arrow with the rectangle, and click. Then you'll see a little arrow appears, and that means that this adjustment is only affecting that one layer. A little bit more editability. Make that a little more crisp if we wanted to. It also has the effect of kind of making the edges harder on the drawing. Try that. So we can make the drawing look a little more crisp by doing that. Okay. So let's say we're done with this and we're going to do two things. We're going to save it again as a PDF. I'm just going to go ahead and click File, Save. Now this may actually create quite a large PDF. Let's see. Yeah, and I'm going to overwrite that same file. I don't original anymore. Now, saving as a PDF from Photoshop will actually preserve also the layers, the editing ability of the file. So I'm going to let that save, and then okay, there it is. We'll see how large it is. It might be quite large. It might be better to actually just export it to it. Yeah, so that's 53 megabytes, which is way too big. So a couple things you could do. So don't just save it as a PDF. That's a bad idea. You can save it as a PDF if you want to, retain the editability of it. Actually, one thing I'm noticing right now is we have a little bit of a line there between where we cropped our drawing. So in order to fix that, that's just an effect of how we selected the background to crop it out. So I could just paint on my transparency mask again, or my layer mask. Paintbrush tool in black to kind of clean that up. Do that fast, I can also click, hold shift and click, and it'll drag a straight line. Like that. Okay, so clean that up. So what we'll do is we'll save it as a Photoshop file. So I'll click save as. It is a Photoshop file. Then I'm going to flatten it. I'll right click here. I'll go to flatten. When you flatten an image, you basically like get rid of all the layers. It all becomes one layer basically. So then if I were to save it, if you're planning to do this in a multi-page PDF, then you would probably just put the Photoshop file in an InDesign layout, or we can do this. Yeah, we do with that. Click yes for everything. Okay, much better. So that's 5 megabytes. That's below our file size limit, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So make sure you flatten it before you export to PDF. And then you can take that file and print it. If you're on a computer that's connected to our printers, of course, you can also just go to File and Print. Print directly from Photoshop. So under Printer, we would select the printer we want to print to. I don't know. I don't think I actually have any of the plotters connected. I don't. But anyway, so you would select the printer you want, and then you would go to, I suppose, Print Settings. Select the paper size you want. From whatever that menu looks like. It might look different if you paper cut. And then go ahead and click Print, and it should, make sure the scale is right. So make sure it's not scaling at all, and you're done. All right. So that should conclude this video. And oh, there's one other thing I wanted to explain very quickly. So let's imagine that our building is kind of embedding into the ground here. So one way we could actually just hit Control Z to undo my flatten there. So let's imagine that we wanted to actually uh, make it look like we're cutting into the earth. So we're cutting into our building at about 4 feet above the ground to show what the inside spaces are. Let's imagine that that cut plane is also at a level where it would cut into the earth uphill from where our pavilion is placed. And that could be the case too if your pavilion is partially embedded in the ground or fully embedded in the ground. So what I would do is I would actually create an area. Let's say I would just choose the contour you want to have the start the cut at into the ground. And so this is something I would actually recommend you do in uh, in Rhino, but you could do it in here as well. I would make that line thicker, and then I would also like select the area where the margins are. That a little bit wider, and you could make a line for that too. So sorry, draw a line in Photoshop. Okay, and then when you draw lines, it's kind of like in Illustrator. Set the color of it. Have it there. And oops, be thicker. Okay. Hmm, be thicker. Oh, I see. It's selecting the bottom layer. Anyway, so you could set it there. Uh, okay. There's the problem. Actually, okay. That's how you would make a line of a certain thickness. Delete those and do it one more time. All right, so make a new line. Wherever it is you want a line. Set the stroke to black, which in our case by default. And then you set it to solid. Yeah, so based on the number of pixels, you can set the width of that line. Very hard to select it. Maybe you can go to the layer itself, right click, or you can hit control click on the layer. That will select it. It's selecting because it's so small, it's hard to click on. So it's selecting like the line behind it, or sorry, the background, the white background behind it. Let's try this one more. I'm gonna actually just draw it where I want it to be. And I think also if you make it thicker, it'll be easier to select. Okay. Right. And then obviously when we're in here, we can also choose. And to make a new line, I'll just click the line tool again, or I'll deselect it first. No. So we wouldn't show this. I mean, we could show it as pochade, but probably advisable. Some options. That. And I'm holding shift to draw the line straight. Yeah, so this is much easier to do in Rhino, or you export to PDF. But in any case, if you wanted to do it that way, you could. So which line? That's our topo drawing. So then I would hide this line because it's inside the cut or inside the fill there. And then I would also need to make that line thicker. So a couple ways you could do that. I think the easiest way would be to just select it and hit and then so where you see so if I were to click on it, what I wanted to do, it would actually like move that area or any of the pixels inside where I selected. I'm grabbing a piece of this line here, so I could hold Alt and deselect that area. And then instead of just holding Control and moving it, I could hold Control Shift. Oops, I don't want to select. I'm sorry, Control Alt and make a copy of just that line. If I did that enough times, it would kind of make it appear it was thicker. So again, not the easiest thing to do in Photoshop, but can be done if needed. So that would represent where we're cutting through the typography. Okay, so that will conclude this video.